Okay, so the show was canceled, and then...
What?
Nickelodeon has some of the most iconic animated shows in the history of television throughout their entire catalog, but very few of them stand out to me as much as Invader Zim. This little cult classic that premiered in 2001 is about a small alien named Zim who serves under an intergalactic organization called the Urkin Empire. The leaders of the Urkin Empire, tired of Zim's incompetence as an invader, reluctantly honor his request for a special mission by sending him to an unknown planet on the far side of the universe. With his new robotic sidekick, Gur, they both subsequently arrive at their destination, which just so happens to be Earth, where Zim makes it his mission to enslave the human race and planet at large. He also attends elementary school disguised as a human boy, which sparks a huge rivalry between him and fellow classmate Dib, a kid obsessed with investigating paranormal and supernatural activity who seeks to expose Zim as the alien he is to the utter befuddlement of the other kids his age. His sister Gaz also knows that Zim is an alien, but she doesn't really care. On a surface level, the series looks unlike anything else the network has produced before or even since its inception. It portrays an extremely nihilistic and dystopian version of human society, filled with brainless consumers that are completely oblivious to everything around them. The show contains plenty of gross and disturbing humor, several instances of which would make prior Nicktoons look tame by comparison. It features children being tortured against their will, something that feels more common on a program for Adult Swim or an indie cartoon rather than a mainstream show marketed to children. The only cartoons I can compare this to, in terms of style and tone, are Rick and Morty and Hazbin Hotel, both of which were aimed explicitly at adult audiences. So how did such a uniquely twisted show make it on a children's network to begin with? Nickelodeon producer Mary Harrington was looking for an animated show that could target their 11 to 15-year-old demographic when she came across a comic called Johnny the Homicidal Maniac from independent artist Jonan Vasquez. She asked him to pitch his own idea for a series on the network, an offer Vasquez gladly accepted. Knowing that his previous works wouldn't be suitable for Nickelodeon's family-friendly image, he came up with his own original idea for a show, combining his childhood love of robots, monsters, aliens, paranormal investigation, science fiction, and horror films. He and the entire cast and crew ended up making one of the best animated shows of the century so far. The heavy emphasis on computer animation made the show more expensive than any other program on Nickelodeon at the time, and compared to other shows utilizing 3D animation in the early 2000s, the CG over 20 years later has only continued to age gracefully. The series' signature dark humor has even given us some of the most disturbing episodes to ever air on any children's network. The most famous one being Dark Harvest, where Zim is called into the school nurse after catching a sickness. Knowing that his body doesn't contain any of the same organs that humans do, Dib tells Zim that the nurse will examine his body and find out that he's an alien. This convinces Zim to use one of his inventions to steal all of the organs from everyone else at the school, and replacing them with stuff so he can appear more human.
I've been working out.
To me, though, I find the Bad Bad Rubber Piggy episode to be even more unsettling. It shows Zim using a space-time object transfer device to make Dib's childhood a living hell, and we see the poor kid become so mentally and physically scarred to the point where he's on the verge of life support. The crew who worked on the show often ended up butting heads with the network over the creative direction for the series. Several supporting characters were originally intended to be killed off, but Nickelodeon refused to have characters die in a show marketed to children, and forced the staff to rewrite episodes to where they wouldn't die, but not without throwing shade at the network at the same time. One example is an end card message at the end of the episode, Hamstergeddon, that said, "No characters were harmed in this episode," despite a ton of characters visibly dying on screen. In the episode Bestest Friend, the character of Keith was originally going to fall off a building and onto a power line and get electrocuted, but Nickelodeon was afraid this would inspire copycat behavior from children, so they forced the crew to come up with a different fate for the character. They thought of him getting run over by a car as the next idea, but Nick still didn't like this either, so they had Keith getting attacked by a squirrel and falling off a building, which the executives were apparently fine with. The crew even found ways to poke fun at the network themselves by inserting a delusional child named Nick in the episode Zim Eats Waffles, where he acts obliviously happy during the most terrifying and dangerous scenarios imaginable, which is exactly how the executives wanted to portray the show, instead of its darker, more cynical tone. Despite the hardships, the acclaim the series was garnering was undeniable. It brought home an Annie and Emmy Award, and to this day is the second highest rated Nicktoon of all time on IMDb, only second to Avatar: The Last Airbender. But despite all of this, it was only a matter of time before the show would meet its unfortunate fate. In January 2002, less than a year after the show premiered, Nickelodeon announced they were pulling the plug on the show, and that production would be wrapping up in the next few months. The show was renewed for a second season just a few months prior, but only 7 of the 20 episodes greenlit for season 2 ended up being broadcast, with the rest left unfinished or never making it past pre-production. Richard Horvitz, who provided the voice of Zim, reacted to the news saying, "It's heartbreaking. I was very emotionally attached to this project. It was one of the best shows I've ever worked on." There's been lots of speculation over why the show was cancelled over the years, and even Nickelodeon has never provided an explanation for why they threw it in the can. Also, Jonan Vasquez was never given any direct reason why Nick halted production permanently. The most likely culprits are simply ratings and the sheer expense of the show, which was monstrously expensive at the time, especially when compared to more modern Flash-based savings fests. Compared to its contemporaries, Zim featured 3D animation in almost every episode, compared to most other Nicktoons which only used any computer animation in TV, movies, or specials. The fact that the show wasn't bringing in the big bucks during its initial run, when you factor in its budget, probably seemed like a waste of money to the higher-ups at Nick. In fact, Zim premiered the exact same morning as The Fairly OddParents in early 2001, a series produced with a more restrained budget that went on to become the network's second most popular and long-running cartoon, just behind SpongeBob. Younger audiences clicked way more with the OddParents' more lighthearted and upbeat demeanor, compared to the absurd and dark comedy present in Zim. Though teens and adults had still tuned in to watch episodes of the series when it first originally aired, the network was only interested in aiming towards their 2 to 11-year-old demographic. The series was originally envisioned to be aired as part of a more mature, teen-oriented programming block than Nickelodeon had planned in the early 2000s, as a way to compete with the popularity of Toonami on Cartoon Network. Nick eventually changed their minds, and they decided they no longer wanted to target older audiences by the time the show was produced. So the network just sandwiched the show between these more younger skewing Nicktoons, like Fairly OddParents and Rocket Power, and the show's ratings suffered as a result. Jonan Vasquez hoped that Nick would hand the show over to a channel like MTV, where it would likely find a more active audience, but they never gave in. Even Adult Swim was interested in picking up the show after Nick had thrown it in the can, but they still refused to sell the rights. Another major theory regarding the show's cancellation is the bloody Gur image that's pretty well known within the Zim community. This fairly obscene picture of Gur covered in blood was inserted as an Easter egg in a few episodes of the show without Nick's knowledge or permission beforehand. Though Vasquez has since said that the network only found out about it after they stopped production on Zim, and were never bothered by its usage since kids would never notice it. But there's also one other major concern over Zim besides its monstrous budget that also likely led to its unfortunate end. You see, as stated earlier, Zim premiered in 2001, and what infamous event also took place that same year? As much as it pains to bring up, the effects of 9/11 undoubtedly left a major effect on the entertainment industry, and Nickelodeon probably didn't feel comfortable airing a show about an alien trying to take over the planet after such a devastating incident took place. It shouldn't be a coincidence that Nick renewed the show for a second season in August 2001, only to stop the show permanently just a few months later after said event took place. One Nickelodeon pilot produced around this time, Constant Pain, that was planned on targeting an older audience like Zim, ended up being shelved by the company over its inclusion of terrorist characters, and a scene that appeared a little too similar to the event on September 11th. The show was even planning on introducing a new recurring sidekick for Zim named Minimoose, who was meant to replace Gur at one point as Zim's companion. But his debut episode, Nubs of Doom, was left unfinished, as Vasquez and crew were only allowed to finish one last episode between it and the holiday special, The Most Horrible Xmas Ever. So they sided with the latter episode being the show's last, which became Minimoose's first and last official appearance. Years later, reruns of Zim could be found on Nickelodeon's sister channel, Nicktoons, and it became one of the network's most popular programs. Additionally, merchandise sales continued to climb after Nick had stopped producing new episodes. With the renewed demand for more Zim content from a substantial audience, It was safe to say that the show had now become a cult classic, and the franchise found new life in the realm of comics. Zim was now one of the most highly demanded canceled shows to get a revival, and after years of speculation, Nick finally gave in to the demand. In April 2017, an all-new Invader Zim TV movie was announced to be in the works, and I was ecstatic. Of all the old Nickelodeon classics that were announced to have a new revival in the works, including Hey Arnold and Rocko's Modern Life, this was the one I was pleading for the most. In fact, if you look back at the first video I uploaded on this channel, I basically just used the music near the end of the teaser for my intro. The 1-hour special, Invader Zim Enter the Florpus, marked the return of the franchise in animated form and was met with immense acclaim from fans and new-time viewers as a satisfying continuation. Though it didn't have as much edge as the original series did in the early 2000s, the great animation, voice acting, and absurd humor is still very much intact. According to Jonan Vasquez, the executives who were supportive of the project in the first place were no longer there by the time it was finished. Leaving it to stream on Netflix instead of the main Nick channel, there was an executive shakeup that took place a year earlier at Nickelodeon, and any potential plans to follow up Enter the Florpus with more Zim episodes or content completely fell through. It's been over 5 years since the special came out, and other than the comic series that ended its run in 2021, there hasn't been anything to come out of Zim since then. Still, the legacy of the show continues to endure. Both editions of Nickelodeon All-Star Brawl had Zim and Gur as characters, and when I attended San Diego Comic-Con last year, they had a SpongeBob-themed exhibit where you could print your own custom t-shirt with multiple different Nickelodeon characters to choose from, and Zim was one of them. It's somewhat ironic that such a short-lived classic is acknowledged by its parent company more frequently than multiple other cartoons since then that have broadcasted way more episodes and lasted on the air longer. But that just speaks volumes about the show's excellent reputation. Zim sadly fell victim to a shakeup in executives and business decisions, which never gave the show an opportunity to truly flourish like it deserved. But nowadays, after years of feeling bitter and betrayed that this amazing show never got that special treatment that its sister shows did, I honestly feel like it might have come off scot-free from not being milked to death like so many Nick shows have. As mentioned earlier, the show premiered the exact same day as The Fairly OddParents, a show that Nickelodeon basically ran into the ground with multiple seasons and movies that severely deteriorated the franchise in quality to the point where people got sick of it. While Zim may never get another chance, at least we can say it never got bad, a sentiment you couldn't say about countless other shows that premiered on the same network. What we did get with Zim in the end, I still think is pretty damn special. Whatever Zim would be doing right now, I hope it's something daring and exciting.